War between Israel and Iran. There are crucial questions. Are the Americans about to enter it? And how is this all going to turn out? With the end of the Ayatollah regime, or is that a bridge too far? Hi, I'm Mark Regev, and welcome to another episode of Israel Undiplomatic. I'm in the JNS studios here in Jerusalem, and I'm speaking to my co-host Ruthie Blum, who is, like last week, in New York.
Hello, Mark. I'm so annoyed that I'm not in Israel right now. You have no idea. And I really want you to describe what the atmosphere is like there, because I'm missing this historic moment.
So it's interesting and it's complicated, but ultimately the energy is very, very positive. I mean, obviously the Israeli civilian population has been on the receiving end of these rockets being launched by the Iranians, and they're landing in urban population areas, and people in the middle of the night on multiple occasions are being asked to go to the bomb shelters. Some houses have their own little shelter rooms. Other people have to go to communal shelters. So it's not easy. People are complaining that the whole country's on jet lag, that people aren't getting a good night's sleep. Yes, but though some 20 people have been killed, I think there's a feeling in the country every death is a tragedy. Every death is a world unto itself. But the ultimate truth is this, that if we think of the number of missiles the Iranians have shot at us and the amount of tonnage of high explosive, we have been very successful in saving lives. We've been very successful in neutralizing the threat. We've been very successful in destroying the overwhelming majority of rockets before they come and explode in Israel. And so there is, of course, a danger, and the public has to be vigilant, and we all have to listen to the instructions given out by the Home Command, which is in charge of our safety as a civilian population. The overall, as I said, the energy in the country is very positive. I think there's a feeling, and it crosses the political spectrum, people who like the government, people who don't like the government, across the country. There's a feeling that Israel is finally doing what we need to do. And there's a sort of a sense of national purpose, a sense of national unity, that we have finally, hit Israel's most important enemy. People have used, the metaphor for years now of the octopus, yes, that Hezbollah was one tentacle of the octopus and Hamas was another tentacle and the Houthis were another tentacle. But ultimately, the head of the octopus was the regime in Tehran, and Israel is finally taking steps to deal with the real threat.
Well, that's right. And by the way, I think a lot of people don't realize that this operation, this war, launching this preemptive defensive strike, has been in the works for 19 years in the planning stages. Every branch of the army, the government, previous governments, previous chiefs of staff, previous heads of Mossad and the Shin Bet, it has been in the works. And that is why it looks so amazingly successful. And, being in America and being asked by announcers here, how is it that if this strike is so carefully planned and the intelligence is so amazing, how did October 7th happen? How did we miss that when it was right on our border? Iran is farther away. It's some 2,000 miles away, and Gaza is right on our border. And how is it we missed that when the head of the octopus, as you said, we actually have been handling that beautifully?
So it's a good question. I'm not sure there's a good answer. I would propose the following, though, way of thinking about it. There's no explaining it whatsoever. October 7th is a huge failure. And the same, Israeli military and intelligence services that are performing so excellently today against Iran failed dismally on October 7th. And I think one of the explanations is that people didn't see Hamas in Gaza as the sort of serious threat that it turned out to be. And so the problem was ignored and not taken seriously. The Iranians were always taken seriously. Hezbollah in Lebanon was always taken seriously. But I think in many ways, people in Israel said, oh, well, Hamas are not nice people, they're Islamists, but their ability to hurt us, the thinking was relatively limited compared to the strength of Hezbollah, compared to the strength of Iran. And therefore, for the intelligence community and for the others in the National Security Council, it was maybe seen as more of a peripheral threat. Every couple of years, we'll have to do a military operation. We'll have to, as they used to say, mow the grass. And it wasn't given the thinking and the priority that we should have. And October 7th exposed that.
And you know what? You mentioned Hezbollah and Iran as these huge threats. And because of that, I know for years, people are saying, especially after the wars in Lebanon, when Hezbollah fired rockets and missiles into Israel, that the sense was that we really can't poke the bear of Hezbollah, an Iranian proxy, or especially not Iran, because hundreds of thousands of Israelis will be killed. There was this sense that it's too dangerous and all that. And now what we're really seeing is a whole different view of Iran. First of all, the ease with which we took out Iran's air defenses in October, the relatively, as you said, low casualty rate in Israel, very low, from Iranian retaliation for our preemptive strike. And what we saw during the October 7th war is basically how easy it was to completely demolish Hezbollah. Not completely, but certainly to decimate it, certainly to weaken it, to get rid of all its leaders. And so the question is Iran real? Was it all this time just a paper tiger? I'll just add one other thing to that. And people have asked, well, why now? And one thing we know is that the International Atomic Energy Agency, no friend to Israel's, by the way, said last week or 2 weeks ago that Iran has enough enriched uranium to produce 9 nuclear bombs. And that partly explains the timing.
So that's true. There's no doubt that Iran was moving forward on its nuclear program. And I don't have to tell you, or all our listeners, I presume, that they weren't producing medical isotopes for medical purposes in hospitals. Their nuclear program only had one reason, and that was to produce nuclear weapons to turn Iran into a military nuclear power. That was their goal. And anyone who believes anything to the contrary is fooling themselves. Yes, it's just ridiculous. No one takes it seriously that their nuclear program is only for peaceful purposes. Even I like it when President Trump jokes about it. He says this is a country with more fossil fuel energy than any other country in the world, maybe. And so to presume that they need nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, you have to presume that they're all these, that the Ayatollahs are rabid, not rabid Islamists, but they're rabid environmentalists. And it just doesn't stand up to logical criticism. And they were getting closer than ever before to nuclear weapons, as the recent IAEA document. But the intelligence communities of Israel, the United States, we knew this all along. And I think it was time to act. I think also, the situation made it probably the time for Israel to act. Number one, their proxy armies had been, if not destroyed totally, but they'd really cut down to size. I mean, the Iranians over decades spent literally billions of Iranian taxpayer money on building up Hezbollah in Lebanon. And the idea of it wasn't for Lebanon or it wasn't for Hezbollah. The idea was to give Iran an ability to hit Israel from up close. And they built up this proxy army with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of rockets. And it was like, I've spoken about this before, I'm sorry for repeating myself, but it was exactly like the Soviet Union and Cuba. They, in the 1962, the famous Cuban Missile Crisis, the Russians had their own missiles, but by moving missiles right on America's doorstep, they had the ability to threaten America in a way they didn't have in the past. And Iran spent all this money, all this energy, all these resources, all this time to build up Hezbollah, so that if one day came and Israel felt it had to hit Iran to take out its nuclear facilities, then we would face incoming rockets just from across the frontier in the north. And the fact that in the months leading up to this operation, Israel largely neutralized the Hezbollah threat, and the Assad regime fell, which was also another crucial Iranian ally, made the ability of Israel to attack Iran much more feasible from our perspective. In other words, the threat of retaliation was drastically reduced. Then you've got to remember also our long-distance strikes against the Houthis in Yemen. The distance between Israel and Yemen is very, very long, but it's the same, more or less, as the distance between Israel and Iran. And so we had all that practice, not that we wanted to do it, but forced to deal with the threat from Yemen. Our pilots, our Air Force got much more skilled at these long-distance flights. You add that to taking out the air defenses in Iran as a result of the two operations that we did in 2024. This was a unique moment to strike. And then you add all to that, and maybe most importantly, an American administration that was not going to stop Israel from doing what it needs to do. And you, from New York, saw that firsthand.
Well, that's right. And, you're talking about President Trump. Let's talk about that. It wasn't just Iranian taxpayer money that was funding terrorism all over the world and the ballistic missile program, et cetera. It was the United States under President Barack Obama who signed that horrific deal, gave the regime billions of dollars. And then when President Trump came into office, in 2016 or 2017, actually January 2017, he after a few months, he ripped up the nuclear deal. And then the Biden administration unfroze all the money. And so basically what you can say is the Democratic administrations of Obama and Biden provided Iran with tons of money, enabled it to go full speed ahead, not only with its nuclear program. I think people have to understand the nuclear program is bad enough, but the ideology that is being spread through proxies all over the world and terrorism, and hundreds of Americans have been killed all over the world thanks to Iran. And so it's very disturbing when, you and I've spoken about this before, where I was very concerned that the isolationist wing in the Trump administration was going to take precedence, constantly saying, we don't want Israel to drag us into a war, etc. And now we're seeing that President Trump is fed up with the Iranians, and he is posting on Truth Social. He said they need to unconditionally surrender. And he said, we're not going to kill the Ayatollah Khamenei just yet. And all kinds of threats and promises. This is concerning to some people in his administration. But I think that we saw, as he said about Tulsi Gabbard, when she said that Iran is not working to build a nuclear bomb, he said, I don't care what she says. And she's now threatening to resign if America gets actively involved in the war. And just finally, I'd like to say about that, we don't know if he's going to actually get involved in the war, though it certainly looks like it. But what we know is even if he doesn't, what Israel needs is the bunker buster bombs that are 30,000 pounds and the B-2 stealth bombers that are the only planes capable of carrying, and they're capable of carrying 2 such bunker buster bombs. And they're the only ones that can hit Fordo, the nuclear plant Fordo.
So, first of all, it's to give the Americans their credit, and they deserve it. They've been helping to defend Israel. They've been helping to take down those offensive rockets that are coming from Iran to Israeli cities trying to murder our people. And here the Americans are fully on board, and we thank them for their support. Their missile defense helping us to protect Israel is greatly appreciated. What the Americans so far have not been doing in any overt way is involved in actually targeting Iran itself. So they've been helping Israel protect ourselves from the Iranian missiles coming, but they haven't been firing their own missiles at targets in Iran. And that's a question. What will the president do, and will he change that policy? And obviously, many people in Israel would like to see America come and help us finish this off. I mean, American presidents have been saying for for years, including the two you just mentioned, Biden and Obama, that we will never allow Iran to have a bomb, yes? But what have they done to stop it? And this now maybe is a unique opportunity to end the Iranian program once and for all. Now, obviously, this is a difficult decision for every American president. He has to worry about what will be the blowback, to what extent will it drag America into a conflict and so forth. I want to say the following. Whatever he decides, he has to know that no one is talking about the proverbial boots on the ground. No one is talking about an American ground forces invading and occupying Iran the way it was done in Afghanistan and in Iraq. No, we're talking about targeted airstrikes. We're not talking about any ground forces. And so the threat, I think, to American ground forces in an invasion doesn't exist. Could there be retaliation by the Iranians against American targets in the region and beyond? You can't exclude that. But you wouldn't be talking about a sort of a massive ground operation like you had, as I said, in Iraq and Afghanistan. The other thing that I think the president needs to think about it, he's in the first months of his presidency. What is he, at 6 months now or something since he came into the White House in January? It's even less than 6 months. My math was never good, Ruthie. You'll correct me later. But there's a famous story about the Nixon administration that comes into office in January 1969. And in the first few months of their administration, the North Koreans do this thing. I think they shoot down or shoot at an American plane, and basically Washington turns the other cheek. And both Nixon and Kissinger say publicly afterwards that was a mistake, because all the American adversaries and enemies were looking and saying, well, how does this resolution, the way they behaved, how does that affect the way the administration is seen? As I say, both by adversaries, by allies, and by enemies. And here, Trump is new. The administration is new. He's got a lot of fish to fry. He's got Russia. He's got China. He's got a lot of very, very serious issues on his plate, much larger than Iran in many ways from a global perspective. And the way he acts now, though, in this crisis will determine what happens in many ways over the next 3.5 years. And I think it's his decision, but I think a show of American resolve, a show that America, you don't mess with America. We offered you a diplomatic path. We're still offering you a diplomatic path. But if you refuse to dismantle your nuclear program peacefully, it'll happen in another way, and we'll be part of that. I think a show of American resolution now will have a positive spin-off effect for the next 3.5 years of the administration, and I think the president should think about that, and maybe he already has.
Well, of course he has. And we saw that the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, he posted on Truth Social a lovely post about President Trump and how, God gives certain figures in history these missions or opportunities, and that he will go down in history, and that it's, he's encouraging him to join this effort, and we know that Trump is thinking of it. Now, I have an apology I'd like to make to President Trump, and that is, in our broadcast in the past, I said he's kidding himself. He's negotiating with Iran, and with Steve Witkoff going there and having negotiations and saying that they're optimistic. And I really thought that they'd gone crazy, okay, because there is no such thing as a good deal with Iran. Now what we're seeing is that what he meant by a deal was total capitulation on the part of the Iranian regime. That's what he actually meant. We offered you the path to wave a white flag, and you do it peacefully, or you do it the hard way. That's what we're seeing that he meant. I don't know if Steve Witkoff meant it. I don't know if the other people in the administration meant it, but it's clear that that's what Trump meant. Furthermore, as we see with his huge fight with Tucker Carlson, whom he called kooky, he's also saying to the isolationists in his party and in the administration, I decide what MAGA is. I decide what America First is. And I was so relieved to hear that, because I've been saying all along, make America great again means make it the biggest superpower in the world. And that means defeating the enemies of the West and of America. And Iran is a huge threat to America. And I'm sick of hearing people say, well, but if America gets involved, it's endangering its troops stationed in the Middle East. Well, too bad. That's what troops are there for. They're there to fight an enemy when it's necessary. They're not supposed to be, it's civilians who are supposed to be protected by the military. And if you're troops stationed somewhere and you're not prepared to fight, or your country isn't prepared to, I don't know, take the risk that you're endangered, well, then don't be in the military. And after all, America has a voluntary military. It's not forced conscription. So that I don't want to hear anymore. The American troops and American citizens have been in danger and killed by Iran for decades. In other countries, we've seen it all around the world. And so this business of, no, we don't want to endanger anybody in case Iran retaliates.
So I want to disagree with you there. I think it's the responsibility of the Israeli Prime Minister to worry about Israeli troops. It's the job of the President of the United States to worry about American troops. No commander-in-chief can take the lives of the servicemen and women who are fighting in uniform. That's an important consideration, and I think the president is right to take that consideration. But that's not the only consideration. It's one of many considerations, because if it was the only consideration, you'd never go to battle anywhere, because obviously when you go to battle, soldiers are going to die. The consideration is, what is the result of Iran actually going nuclear? And when that is looked at, you can see that the meaning of that happening, the implications of that happening on the Middle East, on the world, on the United States of America is such that the risk is so high and the cost is so high that today the other risks, I think, balance out. In other words, I wouldn't unnecessarily put U.S. servicemen into harm's way. But here it's clear that if you do nothing, if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, then the cost is much higher and many more people will probably die. So I think, and once again, it's President Trump, and I think he's correct in looking at the lives of his servicemen and women. But I think what has to be seen in a larger picture. Now, I remember when the Iranians took out the head of the Revolutionary Guards in the first Trump administration, and everyone talked about a massive Iranian response, and guess what? There was practically nothing. Practically nothing. They did something symbolic to show that they struck back, but nothing really serious. And I think the real truth is this, that the Iranian regime does not want a major war with the United States. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think it's possible for the United States to do a surgical strike against Iranian nuclear targets if they wanted to. And I think the chance of Iran going all out, that'd be suicidal from their perspective. Why would they do it? Of course, the risk is there. Maybe they're crazy. But I think, once again, the risk of not destroying their nuclear program. There was a quote from the German Chancellor, the new German Chancellor. He said, Israel is doing the dirty work of the West. In other words, what Israel is doing is not necessarily, particularly nice to look at, yes? It's war. People are getting killed. That we are doing what is necessary to avoid this nuclear program in Iran, of preventing the Ayatollah regime from getting a nuclear weapon. And if America wanted to join in, I think that would be the right thing to do. But once again, it's the president's call.
Actually, it's funny because I don't care one way or the other whether America joins Israel in the attacks. I do care, however, if America provides Israel with the right bombs and the refueling jets, etc. That is crucial. Whether or not Americans actually fly the planes or do the job, it would be nice, or maybe not. I think that President Trump would like to take credit or be part of this amazingly important operation to shift the whole balance of the Middle East and the world. But it's more important for Israel to do it. Israel's already doing it. We're happy to do it by ourselves as long as we have the tools. But I just would like to take issue with what you said. Of course, President Trump has to take into consideration putting his troops at risk, as does Israel. That's not what I was saying. I was saying there's no point stationing troops anywhere if all they're doing is sitting there. The whole point is to serve as a deterrent to enemies. And sometimes those enemies attack. You know, Iran is responsible via Hezbollah for the slaughter of hundreds of U.S. Marines. Now, the point about the whole point about stationing troops anywhere, and that's true of Israeli troops as well, is that they're there to prevent the enemy from attacking civilians and to fight when necessary. So if what he doesn't want to do is put them at risk, he can just send them home. Let them go live in New Jersey. The point is here that you have, it's not just a volatile Middle East, and this is not a tit for tat issue. You have a radical Islamist jihadist regime that has vowed to destroy Israel and America, has done nothing since it came to power in 1979, but make good on that threat. I mean, attempting to make good on that threat, and established itself all over in South America, North America, everywhere. And the Arab world is just as interested in getting rid of that regime and certainly its ability to create nuclear weapons. But we're seeing they're watching closely, and they want Iran to be defeated. And the Iranian people do too. Now, by the way, President Trump did it. He said all residents of Tehran should evacuate. And we saw traffic jams all through Tehran with people leaving. Why did he say that? He said that because he doesn't want any civilians hurt. And he knows that big military strikes are in the works. I mean, Israel is already doing it, but that indicates to me that he believes America will join. He also said, he posted on Truth Social that he said, we have control of Iranian the skies over Iran. He said we. Now he must mean America, because what is we, unless he meant America and Israel. So the point, though, is that we need to activate militaries in order to fight this threat.
You said, talked about the regime, and let's be clear on this. The Israeli government, the Israeli leadership, the Israeli prime minister have not articulated regime change in Iran as a goal of this war. I think the leadership has been very clear to say the goal is to destroy the nuclear program, to end the nuclear threat, and to deal with the issue of the ballistic missiles, because we've seen what damage these ballistic missiles can cause when they explode. And if the Iranians continue on their path, they literally have tens of thousands of these missiles and the ability to cause massive damage across Israel through conventional means. And so those are the goals of this mission, to defang the Iranian monster, so to speak, to get rid of these most dangerous weapons, the ballistic missiles and the nuclear weapons. They're the goals, and that's what Israel is focused on doing. When it asked about regime change, and of course everyone in the Middle East, Israelis and Arabs alike, as you rightly said, want to see a different sort of government in Iran, one that is not supporting terrorism, one that is not aggressive, one that's not trying to rebuild some sort of empire, the one that's not exporting terrorism and the Islamic Revolution and so forth. But having said that, regime goal has not been articulated, regime change has not been articulated as a goal. What could well happen, though, like happened in Syria, is that as a consequence of your military operation, as a consequence of the successful strikes against the military wing, the Revolutionary Guards, and so forth, the people of Iran will think that there's an opportunity to take power by themselves and throw out this terrible regime that's been their dictators for the last 4 decades. Yes, is that possible? That's possible. But that's a byproduct of the operation. It's not the goal of the operation. Do the Iranian people deserve better than the current bunch of thugs that rule their country? Of course they do. But that's ultimately something for the Iranian people and not for the United States or for Israel.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, it's none of our business, so to speak. What's our business? Our, as an Israeli, I could say, or our as an American, it is in our interest to protect ourselves from that threat emanating from Iran. What the Iranian people do with that, do afterwards, or if they topple the regime or don't, is not our business. It is our business, however, to say, look, you do it or you don't do it. We don't care. But we have to protect ourselves, and we will do it. We will kill any leaders who need to be assassinated, and we will take out nuclear facilities and ballistic missile production and all of that. And the launchers, by the way, let's mention that taking out the launchers is just as important, because without launchers, a missile is worth nothing. You have to be able to launch it somewhere. And we are doing that. Now, the Iranian people, we know that they have taken to the streets in the past. They've been gunned down by the mullahs every time they try to assert their will. And this war will give them an opportunity maybe to get out from under that and get out from under the fear of being gunned down by their regime. But again, you're right. It's not our business. And we hope that whatever replaces the regime, if it is toppled, is a friendly one. We can't guarantee that. That's true. But we have to stop calculating every time everything is, what about the day after, in a place that is an immediate threat? The day after, worry about that. How about today? Today is crucial. And today we have to do this and finish the job. And by the way, it's no accident that Israelis across the political spectrum are for this war. It's unbelievable. Now, some of them don't want to give credit to Netanyahu for it, but that doesn't matter. The point is, I'm shocked to discover that even the left in Israel is behind this.
It's behind it because it's common sense. This is Israel's biggest enemy. This is a person. He doesn't. The Iranians don't want to debate with us where the final peace line will be between Israel and Arab neighbors. These people in Tehran, the Ayatollahs, say Israel has no right to exist in any borders, and it's not just a verbal articulation. It's their policy. That's why they built up these terrorist armies in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Yemen. That's why they built their nuclear program. That's why they're launching those missiles now. This is a regime that believes Israel, and I'm quoting one of their previous presidents, believes that Israel should be wiped off the map. And we don't want to be wiped off the map. And Israelis across the board, no matter what their political persuasion, yes, they want to live. And you see, as I said at the beginning of our conversation today, you see this positive energy in the air, that what we're doing is costing a price. We're seeing these incoming missiles. It's not easy for the Israeli civilian public, but the price is worth paying if we can finally defang the Iranian regime and get rid of these missiles and get rid of the nuclear program. Here, we're running out of time, Ruthie. I'm looking at the clock, but I want to say two things. President Trump said he wants to see Iran great again. And I think Israelis would like to see Iran great again. We remember a time when there was a different government in Iran under the monarchy, for example, though we don't have to have a monarchy in the future, but in the past where we had a very good and productive relationship with Iranians, we'd like to go back to them. And the second thing is Netanyahu, in speaking about this, he mentioned Cyrus the Great, the famous Persian king in antiquity that allowed the Jews to return to their homeland from Babylonian exile. There is every reason for the Iranian people and the Israeli people to get on, to be allies, to be friends, to cooperate, and so forth. Maybe that picture, which almost sounds like something out of the Garden of Eden, almost impossible, is now becoming increasingly possible.
Well, right. And I would just like to end on another note about a hopeful, let's say, consequence of what we're doing in Iran. And that has to do with the hostages still in Gaza. There are still 53 hostages in Hamas captivity. And Hamas, as an Iranian proxy, what we're hoping is that an intended or unintended consequence of this mission in Iran is to help the effort to free the hostages as well.
Amen. I hope you're right. When we defeat Iran now, that will have a ripple effect and will affect other fronts too. First and foremost, we hope in Gaza. And we'd like to see all those hostages home with their families. Ruthie, I'll see you again next week.
Looking forward.